Here's the McDonald's business model explained in one sentence. McDonald's made $16.5 billion from franchise and rent fees last year, and only $9.7 billion from actually selling burgers, fries, and McFlurries at its own restaurants. Franchise and rental income beat company restaurant sales by nearly $7 billion. And the company that owns the land under thousands of those restaurants isn't really in the burger business at all. It's in the landlord business. McDonald's operates more than 45,300 restaurants worldwide. Walk up to almost any one of them, and here's the part almost nobody clocks. About 95% of those restaurants aren't run by McDonald's. They're run by independent franchisees. McDonald's corporate only directly operates around 5% of its own locations. So if McDonald's barely runs its own restaurants, how does it make $26.9 billion a year? In fiscal 2025, total revenue came in at $26.9 billion. Operating income was $12.4 billion, and net income was $8.6 billion. Those are strong numbers for what looks on the surface like a fast food company. But look closer at where that revenue actually comes from, and the picture changes completely. Break the $26.9 billion in total revenue into its two real buckets. Revenue from franchise restaurants was $16.5 billion. Sales from company-owned and operated restaurants were $9.7 billion. Franchise revenue beat company-operated sales by close to $7 billion, even though company-operated stores are a tiny sliver of the system, and franchise stores are the overwhelming majority. Here's how that franchise revenue actually gets generated, straight from McDonald's own filings. Under a conventional franchise, the most common setup, covering roughly half of all McDonald's restaurants, the company generally owns the land and the building or holds a long-term lease on them and then leases that property back to the franchisee. The franchisee pays for the equipment, the signage, the seating, the decor, the stuff inside the box. McDonald's owns the box itself. In exchange, McDonald's collects rent and royalties based on a percentage of that restaurant's sales, with a guaranteed minimum rent payment no matter what. That minimum rent floor means McDonald's gets paid something every single month, even if the franchisee has a slow year. As of the end of fiscal 2025, McDonald's owned approximately 56% of the land and approximately 80% of the buildings underneath its restaurants across its consolidated markets. That's not a footnote. That's a real estate portfolio sitting inside a company most people think of as a burger chain. On the balance sheet, McDonald's carried $28.2 billion of net property and equipment, plus another $14.6 billion of lease right-of-use assets. Add those together, and you get roughly $43 billion tied directly to real estate and leased property, out of $59.5 billion in total assets. That's around 70% of everything McDonald's owns. This structure gives McDonald's three advantages that a normal restaurant chain simply doesn't have. First, guaranteed minimum rent. Because franchise agreements include a rent floor plus a percentage of sales, McDonald's collects steady income whether or not a given restaurant is having a great month. It's the closest thing a fast food company can get to acting like a landlord collecting a lease check.
Second, almost no operating risk on that income. When you own a restaurant, you're exposed to food costs, labor costs, and razor-thin margins on every burger sold. Company-operated restaurants' margins run in the mid-teens, but franchised restaurant margins, the rent and royalty side of the business, ran at around 90% of margin dollars company-wide in recent years, according to McDonald's own investor materials. Collecting rent from someone else's restaurant is dramatically more profitable, dollar for dollar, than running the restaurant yourself. Third, long-term control. Franchise agreements typically run 20 years. Because McDonald's, not the franchisee, usually owns the underlying real estate, at the end of that term, McDonald's decides what happens next. Renew with the same operator, hand a location to a different one, or close it. The franchisee builds a business on land they don't own and structurally can never fully own. Let's put the full scoreboard for fiscal 2025 in one place. Total revenue, $26.9 billion. Revenue from franchise restaurants, $16.5 billion. Sales by company-operated restaurants, $9.7 billion. Operating income, $12.4 billion. Net income, $8.6 billion. Restaurants worldwide, 45,356. Approximately 95% franchised. Land owned by McDonald's, approximately 56%. Buildings owned, approximately 80%. Net property and equipment plus lease right-of-use assets, roughly $43 billion, about 70% of total assets. Franchise restaurant margins made up roughly 90% of total restaurant margin dollars. Every one of those numbers points the same direction. The burgers are the product people see. The rent, the royalties, and the real estate underneath the restaurants are where the profit actually concentrates. To be fair, this isn't the whole company. Roughly a quarter of McDonald's restaurants, mostly in markets like China and Japan, operate under developmental license deals, where the local partner provides their own real estate and McDonald's collects only a royalty, not rent. The landlord model applies specifically to the conventional franchise restaurants that make up about half the system, plus a small slice McDonald's runs itself. But that's still enough real estate, held across tens of thousands of locations for decades, to make McDonald's balance sheet look a lot more like a property company's than a restaurant chain's. This is the same pattern we keep finding on this channel. The visible product on the menu board is rarely the whole story. McDonald's sells the Golden Arches as a burger brand, but underneath that brand is a landlord collecting rent in good years and bad from thousands of tenants who happen to be selling fries. If breakdowns like this change how you look at the companies around you, subscribe, because next up, we're taking apart how a $3 chip inside your phone somehow turns into a $1,000 sale. Drop a comment with the company you want us to dig into next.